Here's the start of chapter 20, talking about pricing concepts. Just like all the other chapters, make sure that you are paying attention to and being able to explain and understand the different learning outcomes, and there's 6 of them here for chapter 20. And with chapter 20, we're going to start with talking about the importance of price and the importance of the pricing decisions that are made based upon the economy and the individual company itself. Now, price means one thing to the consumer and something different to the seller, the store, the retailer, the intermediary. To you and I as consumers, the price is the cost of something. It's what we have to give up to get our product, our good or service. And to the seller, the price is the source of the profits. If the price is not set right, maybe not enough people will buy it, or potentially a lot of people could buy the product, but if the price is not high enough, then they might not be able to bring enough money back in return. So setting a price is not just a random task. It is something that could be very challenging and needs to be well thought out. As I mentioned, price is what we as consumers give up in exchange for a product, a good or a service. Price is usually money exchanged for the product, but it may include other costs, such as potentially time that it takes us to actually acquire the good or the service. So sometimes there's more to it than just the monetary value that has to be included. Consumers are interested in obtaining a quote-unquote reasonable price, which means a perceived reasonable value at the time of the transaction. It's giving us the good value, not just the price, but the overall value of the product to us at the time and the point in time when we purchase the product. There is a difference between the terms revenue and profit. Revenue is simply the money coming in from selling items. Profit is all of the revenue that you get minus all of your operating expenses. Right? Managers should strive to charge a price that will earn a fair profit. They got to make sure that they're making money, but also not taking advantage of the consumer. Setting the right price can be a tough task for a marketing manager. Consumers are using the internet to make wise choices, to be more informed buyers of products, to research, help find the best prices and the best products that are available for them. Competition is increasing, I would say, in general, and with more competitors out there, there are more options for consumers, and with these more options, it gets a little bit more difficult for you as a marketing manager to be able to encourage or influence them to be able to buy your product. So the price is one of those major influencers as well. All right, your pricing objectives. These are 3 things I would definitely recommend that you know. Excuse me. So you have the profit-oriented pricing objective, sales-oriented pricing objective, and status quo. Your pricing objectives must be specific. They need to be measurable. They need to be attainable in order for you to survive in today's competitive market. Now, as I mentioned, the pricing objectives can be divided into 3 categories, so make sure that you are aware of these 3 categories. All right, profit-oriented pricing objectives include what's called profit maximization, satisfactory profits, and target return on investment. All right, now we'll talk about these briefly on the next couple slides. You can see what profit maximization is here. But although it aims at setting prices for a large total revenue. It does not always signify high prices. Right? Both price and profit depend upon the competitive environment that you're in, and also your product's perceived value, which we mentioned earlier, that perceived value. If you charge a price that is higher than that perceived value, you're not going to be able to make much money on it at all. You're not going to have people wanting to buy the product at that particular price. Satisfactory profits represent a reasonable level of profits that is consistent with the level of risk that an organization faces. Okay, the riskier or the safer the product has an impact on the price level as well for your product. Return on investment, often referred to as ROI, is the most common profit objective. It represents a firm's effectiveness in generating profits with the assets that they have available to them. The higher the firm's ROI, the better off the firm is. Okay, the higher the ROI, the better off the firm is. All right, ROI, in essence, puts a firm's profits into perspective by showing the profits relative to the investment that they put into that particular product. All right, now we're talking about sales-oriented pricing objectives here. They're either going to be based on market share or on dollar or sometimes unit sales. So we're going to talk about these just in the next couple slides. Again, these are things that the sales-oriented pricing objectives are something that you're going to want to pay attention to, as well as the profit-oriented pricing objectives. Okay, so just be aware of those. Market share can be reported in dollars. A lot of times you'll see market share as a percentage as well. In class I showed the example of like a pie chart. So that's a lot of time is how it is graphed and visualized. Many companies believe that maintaining or increasing market share is an indicator of the effectiveness of their marketing mix. The larger market shares often mean higher profits, which they go hand in hand, and you want, obviously, higher profits, and you do want to have an increased market share as well. This is not always completely reliable, though. There are some companies with low market share that survive if they're in one of the slow growth type industries, that they don't have a whole lot of product changes, and then they can hang with some of the big boys then at that particular point in time as well. But market share is a big driver. Sales maximization. Maximization of cash should never be a long-run objective. Pretty much because it may mean little to no profitability, and without profits, a company can't survive. So this needs to be kept as more of a short-term objective. Status quo pricing objectives. These are pretty straightforward here. Maintain existing prices or meet competition's prices. This entire category requires very little planning, and it's essentially a passive policy. You're either going to keep your prices where they are or adjust as the competition adjusts. After pricing goals are established, specific prices are then set. All right, so we're going to talk about the role of demand in price, determining your price. Now, demand is from the consumer perspective, supply is from the manufacturer perspective, the supplier perspective. be able to know the difference between supply and demand, be able to graph the supply and demand as well. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on these. As you can see what demand is and what supply is on this slide. I'm not going to read those to you, but the next slide is where I really want to walk you through some things. What you see here is the demand curve. All right, it goes down and to the right. It slopes down and to the right. The quantity of a product that people are going to buy has a direct relationship on the price. As the price for a product goes up, the amount that people are willing to buy goes down. So as a product gets more and more expensive, this example on the slide here is talking about cookies. As the price gets more expensive, $3, $4 for a cookie, the demand for that is going to go down because people don't want to pay $3 or $4 for a cookie. But as the price gets closer to 50 cents, more and more people are going to be willing to buy it. So there is an inverse relationship in regards to the price and the demand. If one goes up, the other goes down. Price goes up, the demand will drop. If the price drops, though, however, people are thinking that they're going to get a better bargain, more bang for their buck, the demand will then go up in that regard. Here's a supply curve. Also, now this is from the manufacturer's standpoint. This is where you, as a company who is making the cookies, you want to supply your product to the businesses that will pay you the most money for your product. So as you're looking at price on that vertical axis, the higher the price means you're getting more money in return for your product from a business. So if you're supplying your cookies to Walmart, for example, and they're willing to give you $3 per cookie, then you want to supply them as much as you possibly can compared to a store that would only give you $1 per cookie. Okay, again, you're going to try to maximize your total revenues and increase your profits. All right, again, two more terms that you should be aware of: price equilibrium and elasticity of demand. Just know those. But then we're going to combine the supply and the demand curves on the same graph. All right, and the equilibrium price is where supply and demand intersect, where they are equal. A price below the equilibrium results in a shortage because the demand is greater than the supply. All right, so down in the below that point where supply and demand intersect is going to be a shortage. The price is too low. Demand is extremely high, and there's not enough of a product out there. At a price above equilibrium, demand is less. Okay, supply is higher, the demand is lower, and you have a surplus because not as many people want it at the higher price. Establishing that equilibrium price, it's very hard to come by, but fluctuating your prices is something that will help you be able to do that. All right, elastic demand is, as you can see here, consumers buy more or less of a product when the price changes, so price does have a major impact there. Inelastic demand means that people are going to be buying the product in essence, whether or not there is a steep change in price at all. Think about milk. And unitary elasticity is when there's an increase in sales, exactly offsets a decrease in prices. So increase in sales, the price goes down, but more people buy it, so the revenue does stay the same. Lastly, there's the equation for elasticity of demand, and then a visual for anybody. You can see exactly how this is going to work. When price goes one direction, when revenue goes one direction, it'll tell you elastic, inelastic, or unitary. And this is where I'm going to pause the first video before we get into video number 2.